What's up, everyone? This is James Quilty, and welcome to another episode of the Beyond Your Faith podcast. Today, I wanted to share a story of a principle that I learned in the book of Daniel when I was struggling with COVID. And it's the same principle that you can apply today to any struggles that you're going to be able to overcome them and come out on top. So let's get to it. So thinking back when I was growing up, whenever I thought of the story of Daniel, it was always Daniel in the lion's den. Am I right? About how God miraculously closed the mouths of the lion when Daniel was thrown into the pit, and he was saved after staying down there for, an entire, evening. And that was always what, came to mind. I never thought once that there would be something that in there that would literally help me when I was suffering with COVID and would change my entire outlook on life moving forward. So let me give you the backstory. So at the time that I caught COVID, we were just coming out of the lockdowns, and we were starting to go back to church. And I think that we had gone to church. I think it had been like a couple weeks at that point, and it was a Friday. And it was like any other Friday, not a big deal. But as we started getting closer to the evening, I started to get more and more fatigued. And it really wasn't a big deal for me, or it wasn't a really big alarm, because at that time it was close to spring, or it was around springtime. And since my wife and I had moved to Texas, every time that it started to spring, with everything blossoming and pollen everywhere, one or both of us would always get some sort of a sinus, issue, right? And it'd always start with a headache, and then the next day we'd have a fever, and then after that the fever would go away, and then we'd have like a stuffy nose for about like a week, and we'd be sneezing and have like runny watery eyes. Not that big of a deal. So by that evening, when I had my wife, take my temperature, and I had a fever, I chalked it up to that. And it wasn't until that next day, Saturday, which again, it was not a big deal. I felt, I felt like I had a little bit, more energy. It wasn't, to me, it wasn't any big deal. It's probably like a sinus thing. And for whatever reason, when I was, in our bathroom, I immediately thought, well, one of the things if you have COVID is you can't taste or smell anything. I don't know why that popped in my head, but it just did. And my wife had some essential oils that were, sitting on the counter, and I remember grabbing one, sticking it up to my nose, and at that point, I was like, oh my Lanta. I couldn't smell anything, and I told my wife, and so she's like, wait, hang on a second, and she grabbed an essential oil. I think it was like peppermint or spearmint. I think it was peppermint. The one that's like really super strong that, you have to waft. Like really, if you stick it up into your nostril, your nose would be like burning for like hours. So she gave that to me, and I took a big whiff, and wouldn't you know it, I couldn't smell a thing. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I went, I think not that day, but maybe I think it was like the next day. I think it was a Sunday. I went to go get the test. And I started progressively after that Saturday. I started to get more and more fatigued. The fever had come back. I wasn't feeling really good, and the test came back and it was positive. I had COVID, right? And so at that time, my wife and we decided, okay, well, I need to isolate. So I got my stuff. My wife, got things that I needed, and I stayed in the girls' room, right? And the girls and my son stayed in the other side of the house. And so I was like, okay, well, and up until that point, I had not really gotten like really, really sick. I had been fairly healthy. I had, always eaten right. I'd always, exercise. And to me, it was, okay, well, this is just like another thing. It's not a big deal. I'm healthy. It's not like I have any underlying issues. This is not going to be a big deal. Boy, was I in for a rude awakening. I think it was like after I got that test, it was like a week in. I mean, literally, I couldn't move. I was so fatigued. We had the monitor where you had to you put it on your finger, and I can't even remember what it monitored. I know it was supposed to be in a certain range, and that's where you're looking for. It was like oxygen levels, I think it was. I can't remember, but I had that. My wife, she would she would have the mask and she would, bring, the food in. And then when I was done, she would come and, she would, take it out of the room. None of the kids, she didn't want any of the kids, coming to the bedroom, and I totally agreed. But literally I had like no energy, and it had been like, 2 weeks. And during that time, I had fatigue like you wouldn't believe. I couldn't get comfortable. I had headaches. I had fever. I couldn't taste anything. And it was miserable. Every time that she brought something, I tried to, get some sort of nutrients in. Most of it was like bone broth. And, I would just, sip on it for a little bit, made sure I had some water. But other than that, I didn't really, eat much. And it was about like 2 weeks, and I remember I was like, I can't do this anymore. And my wife was taking, the kids, to her mom's house, and she was like, running errands. I think it was like the first time they'd actually, gotten out of the house. And I was like, I got to get out. I can't sit in this room anymore, even though I was so fatigued. And I remember going outside our door, and we live on a cul-de-sac. And so I was just going to walk out to like the main road, which is, it's not that far. It's like maybe like what, 20, there's maybe like, 20 or 30 yards, give or take. And I had gotten just like a few feet, and literally I felt like I had, just finished a marathon. I was like, I can't believe this. And for me, and I'm going to be honest, I almost had a sort of arrogance when it came to health, because I'd always been really healthy. I had never experienced anything, or I've never had like any setbacks, any injuries, or any of that stuff. Right. And that day when I was walking out, I felt like I couldn't go anymore. After I'd only gone like I'd just gone, outside my driveway, and I'd only gone like a few feet on our cul-de-sac, and I felt like I was going to pass out. It was horrible. And, I managed, to get back, and I was like laid out for like, the rest of the day. And I remember, the next, couple of days, I was just thinking, is this it? Is this how it's going to end? And I remember just thinking back of it. I remember just the despair, just thinking, is this it, Lord? Is this going to be my time? Am I going to, leave my family? Is my journey ending? I mean, all of these thoughts are, going through my mind. And I remember reading through, Daniel, and I came to Daniel 1:8, and I had always read through this, and it never really jumped out at me. But at this time, it kind of again, I really didn't understand the principle behind this, but it kind of got me thinking. It kind of made me stop. And it says, but Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to him by the king. And he asked the chief of the staff for permission not to eat these unacceptable foods. And if any of you have read through Daniel, right, most people, when they read this, are like, oh, health, I got to eat vegetables. That's what Daniel did for 10 days, and he looked better than everybody else, right? And then now we have all these different, health, the Daniel plan and stuff like that, right? But for me, it had nothing to do with food. It was that first line. But Daniel was determined not to defile himself. And I kept thinking that. For whatever reason, it just stuck with me. And when I finally, got the courage to get up and to go outside again, I was like, well, if this is it, then it's fine. I'm not gonna go into bed. If I'm gonna go, I'm gonna go out on my terms. And that was my thought process. And so I went outside, and I was walking, and I went a little bit further, but same thing. I didn't have any energy. I couldn't, go any further. I went a little bit further than I had done before. And I remember hunching over, hands on my legs, breathing heavily. And then at that moment, I remember again what Daniel in that passage, but Daniel was determined not to defile himself. And I remember saying, you know what? Tomorrow may not be promised to me, and I can't change that I have COVID. I can't change tomorrow, but what I can do is I can change today. I am not going to give in to this. The Lord can take me, but I am going to keep going. I am going to keep fighting through. I'm not going to go out like this. This is not how the story is going to end. I remember speaking that, and I said, I'm going. And I remember I walked, even though as difficult as it was, I walked to the end of the cul-de-sac. And then I walked back. And progressively over the next few days, I kept going a little bit further and a little bit further. And I kept saying that I'm not going out like this. I am not giving up. I am still here. And what I didn't realize, and it wasn't until afterwards, the principle that I was using from Daniel 1:8 was just like Daniel. He determined. He made a decision. And to decide is actually taken from the Greek root word, and I can't remember. I think it's decia. I can't remember exactly what it is, but what it means is literally to cut off. Means there's no other options. And so many times when we are in situations, we flip-flop, we worry, and we fear. We don't decide, right? And if you go to a James 1:6, James is talking just about this same principle. And he says, but when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like the wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. And in verse 7, it says, that man should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. So even the Lord rewards those people who make a decision, who cut off all other options. Because when you flip-flop, what happens? You fear, you worry, you're not sure, right? You don't move. And just like what James was talking about in 1:6, if you're asking for wisdom, you need to believe. You need to decide, I'm going to the Lord and I'm deciding in my heart, God is going to answer me. Whatever, that answer may be, but he is going to do that. And you don't flip-flop. And then in Revelation, and my wife loves this because she's always in Revelation. That's one of her favorite books. But in Revelation 3:16, it says, so because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I am about to vomit you out of my mouth. Right? And then in verse 15, right before that, this is really huge. I know your deeds. This is Jesus speaking. You are neither cold nor hot. How I wish you were one or the other. And then he goes on to say in 16, so because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I am about to vomit you out of my mouth. So what is Jesus saying? He either wants you to be for him or against him, but he wants you to decide. He wants you to have some sort of decision, right? And he says, how I wish. He didn't even say, I want you to follow me. What did he say? In verse 15, how I wish you were either one or the other. The only ones that he chastised are the ones that are flip-flopping, worrying, all right? The ones who haven't made a decision. And what I didn't realize was what I was doing as I was trying to push through this sickness with COVID-19. I was deciding that I was going to keep moving forward. I was going to keep doing what I've always done. I was going to continue to get myself healthy. I wasn't going to be laying in a bed. I wasn't going to be giving up. I decided there was no other options. If Jesus decided that this was my last day, then so be it. But I was going to go out, exercising. I was going to go out pushing myself. I was going to go out doing everything that I possibly could. Does that make any sense? And I feel that emotion. I feel that determination and that drive of like, I am not going backwards. I'm not giving into this sickness, which brings me to the principle that I wanted to talk about that I learned in Daniel and just talked about in James as well as in Revelation, is that principle of decision. If you are ever struggling in anything in your life and you want to turn it around, then you have to apply that principle of decision. You have to determine in your heart. You have to decide that I am either going to go this way or this way, but I'm not going to be flip-flopping. I'm not going to be like James when he talks about somebody who doesn't believe or doubts. And he's like the ship that's in the wind that keeps tossing from back and forth. Right? Does that make any sense? It is that decision when you cut off all other options. I believe that is when the Lord moves, and that's when he moves in huge ways, and that's when he starts moving mountains, because I believe that he's there and he's given us the choice. He's given us the choice, which is the gift that we have that no other creature on earth has. And I believe that God is looking at us and looking down, and he's wanting us to actually make a decision, wanting us to what? Wanting us to decide either way. He's given us that choice when you're going to use that gift, right? And when we make that decision, I believe that is when all the angels in heaven start rejoicing, because that is when Jesus is like, look at what my servant is doing. Look at what my boy JC is doing. He's not giving up. He's going to do it. I believe in you. And I share that with you because just like Jesus said that we are going to have trouble in this life, but we have the choice to either decide we're going to give up or decide we're going to push through. We also have that choice to decide that we're not going to do anything. And just like what Jesus said in Revelation, he wants you to make a choice either or, not to sit back and to make no choice, to be lukewarm, to flip-flop. So if there's anything that you are struggling with in your life, just make a decision. The Lord will guide you on that path. And you know what? Sometimes it's the wrong path and he will guide you. But I believe that he will bless that. Even if it is the wrong path, even if you make the wrong decision, guess what? He is going to bless that. Why? Because just what he said in Revelation, he wants you to either be hot or cold. He wants you to make some decision. He doesn't want you just to be sitting there on the fence. And when you make a decision, you're in action, you're moving, right? You've cut off all other options, and he can work with that. He can't work with somebody that is just sitting back, waiting. And I believe so many Christians are stuck especially in these times, because they haven't made a decision. They're afraid, and I get that. But if you want to move forward, if you want things to happen in your life, you want the Lord to move in your life and in the people around you in their lives, then you need to determine, like Daniel did, that I am not going to defile myself. This is how it's going to be. You need to decide in your heart, like I did, I am not going out like this. I am going to push through this. And if this is my last day, well, then I'm going to be walking and I will keel over, but at least I will not do it just laying back, waiting for death to take me. Does that make any sense? And here we are, years later, I have gotten through that, and I'm stronger for it. Not only physically, but also spiritually. And the Lord has opened up a lot more to how to apply these principles. And now I get the opportunity to share it with you. Had I given up, I wouldn't be here today, sharing with you the things that I have learned. So if, again, really quick, before we end this podcast, if there's something that you are struggling with, if there is something that you think you should do, make that decision. Move. Just take a step. It may not be the right one, but at least you're moving, and the Lord can work with that, and he can guide you back onto the path if it's the wrong one. So I hope you got some value out of this. Again, apply the principle of decision, and you will see mountains move. So you have an awesome day. That's all that I have for today. And as always, I'm going to talk to you in the next episode. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you found this episode informative, inspiring, and most of all, helpful. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your family and friends. Until next time, keep searching God's Word and applying what you have learned to live an abundant life that honors Him.